You're good.
Are we Facebook Live?
Facebook Live.
Welcome. We do have a few people in the audience, and I'm very happy about that. We are going to take your questions live on Facebook too. Maybe one of our people in the audience.
You guys have cell phones too, so we can look at it through there. I mean, it's kind of informal.
So what our goal here is we know that Washington Avenue is going to be up for a construction project starting in 2022.
Yep.
But we understand there are issues and problems that face our residents now. One, the goal here tonight from you, and we'll do this multiple times leading up into the project, is to essentially have the best project and the best possible outcomes both now and in the future for the residents and all of Vincennes. We are going to gather the information that we learned tonight. Some of it maybe we can apply right away by giving it to the engineer or the Board of Works, Board of Public Works, which is the Board of Public Works and Safety, and they can make changes along the way to increase what we perceive as sometimes safety issues in that neighborhood or in that area with Greg Park. So your information, one of the reasons we're doing it on Facebook Live is that it gives us, we don't have to take notes. It will actually be on a recorded video, so we'll be able to go back and look at that video and then present those things along the way. Tim and Brian are both here. I'm going to let them talk too.
Okay, one of the key things is obviously we've got issues right now that we need to address. We've seen some specific things where it comes to pedestrians in relationship with cars. We've seen a lot of things with speeding. I know that's one of the bigger issues. When you look at that chunk, I mean, you're looking at from St. Clair basically all the way out to 41, there is no stop. So even the best drivers sometimes are like, well, I start off and going 20, and then before you know it, you're 35, 40. That's not good. Another key thing is we've got a large residential area, then right up next to our biggest park. And obviously with COVID, a lot of people have been using Greg Park, which is a great thing. We've got a lot of people there. So there's a lot of movement, a lot of bodies, a lot of vehicles. And we need to make sure the safety of that area is basically up to par where it needs to be. So, like we said, we've got a project coming on. We don't want to wait 2 years to see, hey, what can we do in 2 years to help fix it, because this big project will hopefully alleviate a lot of those issues. The key thing is, what are some things that we can take now from people that live there? I mean, I'm a person that spent a lot of time on Washington Avenue, went to Washington School. Obviously, with football, we're down there all the time. With Greg Park, you know, my kids and I are down there all the time. So we see this a lot, and you see a lot of the issues that we're going through. So we're going to try to brainstorm some things to see what we can do to kind of alleviate some of those issues now before we get to a bigger project. And hopefully this is something where we can implement simple things like this in other areas around town, not just here. Obviously, Washington Avenue is kind of the focal point right here, but we've got other areas that are very similar like this that we can implement certain things that help us make the city a little bit safer for people to be out. Because I don't know about you, I want people out in the community using all of our facilities and all of our parks and all the great things that are out there.
And I mean, the key point is you're going to see this committee doing this on all projects, not just this project, but everything that we do. Hopefully, we can have these brainstorming sessions to come up with better projects in the future.
Before we get to questions, there is I think we've entered a perfect storm in that area. One, COVID and the increased use of the park. Two, for the last 3 years, there's been enhanced policing based on the schools actually using the Washington School facility. And that has caused people to want to slow down, pay attention. Well, that's now dissipated. So you have people that are not there doing the patrolling, not to say that they're not, but all the time, but they're not there as a focus all the time. And then you have greater use of the park. So that's created some issues here.
And the issues that we're seeing, we saw 3 years ago. And then when the school started really using it and started picking up, you had some of our bigger schools go online for the remodel. We had more crossing guards out there. We had a bigger police presence. You had buses that were going, a lot more buses going in and out of that area, which basically acted as de facto stops. So when you were down in that, and I spent a lot of time down there with the schools, it was slow moving. It was easy to, get to the other sides of the road. People were very cautious of what was going around because we knew there were a lot of kids around during that time. Well, after that 3-year period, and now we've seen a couple months where we realized that, hey, there's not as much traffic there. You don't have the crossing guards there. The police presence isn't there because we've got other areas now where there's more traffic going to. So we've started to see some of these issues rise up again. And the question is, all right, now what do we do to alleviate some of these things to make it safer? So we get back to where people are out enjoying the parks, out on our sidewalks, out going back and forth between the park, and not really worrying about those interactions between vehicle and pedestrian.
So the questions I want to ask residents is the area that I think is probably the biggest focus is Old Orchard to McDowell. That is probably the biggest where I see personally, this is me not living in the area, where I see the greatest amount of people crossing back and forth. What I want to hear from residents is that the biggest area? What streets do you feel the least safe trying to cross into the park? Is it dark in areas? What kind of speeds are you seeing from people? All those type of things is what we're trying to gather. And once we have that information, there may be, I mean, I have different ideas that I want to see at that place, but that doesn't mean that any of those are right. I don't live there every day, so I want to hear from you guys. Where's the first place you don't feel safe? Or do you always feel safe?
I would say I always try to use the crosswalk because just out of that courtesy, there is a crosswalk there, but it's never acknowledged, so it's not safe. I'll wait for 30 cars easily without people stopping, and then if somebody does stop, other cars will go around them. It's treated like a 4-lane road.
Okay.
But smart to my Facebook branch, really weird, real relative. But I had ran 14 miles that day. I finished up in the park. I'm ready to go home. I was waited for probably a dozen cars. Across the road, there was a car back behind, at least 2 blocks away. She came through the street at least 50 miles an hour, and she couldn't see. Like she had no idea that I was in the intersection, and that was just due to her physical appearance. But so I don't think any of the crossing areas are safe. I always try to go on that crosswalk. I do run in the morning. It's not very well lit. A lot of times the lights there at Washington are out. But at least with the crosswalk, you're going into the sidewalk onto the park. The other 2 streets, they don't allow that.
Okay. I think one of the observations you made that I thought about but never realized that people were using it as is the 4-lane type of situation.
If people are turning 60, you turn onto Burnett, people are going around on the right. Or if you're turning up into the Heights, people are cutting around and going through there. It's just so wide.
Yeah, I think people forget how wide that road really is, and especially too, like, you start off and when you're further down where St. Clair is, it's not as wide, but when it gets into that turn, it really does widen out.
Well, that's considered parking, though, isn't it, too? Because at football games, there people park there.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I think up to McDowell, possibly, but probably, those people are in the chiropractor's lot, but that's probably as far back as.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know for like football games they've used it, but I don't know if it's.
I don't see any during the
We
day.
encourage people to use the park because you go through the park into the game that we've just put all these sidewalks in to get people easily in and field.
I don't see them parking on Washington Avenue right now.
So then, that area is
A third
useless,
lane.
really.
Yeah, it's useless.
It's a turn lane.
dead
It's,
space.
it's dead space.
That specific thing happened to me this morning. I'm not a resident there, but on my way home from taking my daughter to school, I'm behind someone turning left into the park. The person behind me goes out around me, passes me on the right going 45. Had there been someone in that crosswalk, that person would have been.
That visibility's not there
Like,
either.
no, it isn't there.
And she passed me on the right and just zoomed straight down.
Do you think more visibility would help?
I think visibility would help. That crosswalk is not real.
Right.
There's signs. It's,
Yeah, but they're
but
they're
they're
far
spaced
apart.
out. They're spaced out, and the crosswalk itself is very faded. So, I mean, unless you live there, you don't know to look.
Well, I think too, just like normal signs that people get, so you get used to it, and it's like, okay, they're here.
I do know that in the project moving forward, because of what the city council enacted when they did complete street ordinance, maybe some of that wideness could be taken up by bike lane or something like that in the future, because that is what is dedicated in the ordinance already.
So just to kind of hit on the complete street ordinance, all right, we passed the complete street ordinance 3 years ago. All right, so basically what it is if you can do it, then there's these certain criteria that they want to meet with the complete streets. That's sidewalks, that's bike path, that's lighting, those kind of things. So when you talk about complete streets, I think of like Second Street. When you think that new stretch of Second Street, you think of the new strip of Main Street. If we can do it, then that's what we're supposed to do per ordinance. The ordinance doesn't really hold you that you have to do all these things, but it guides you and says, this is what we want you to do. We want you to try to accomplish these things. So I know moving forward with any street project that we want to see, we're going to use that complete streets format moving forward.
I will tell you that in road design, and I'm not a road designer, but it is a boring hobby of mine that I love. That travel time between destinations when you're walking is very, very important. The less that travel time, the better you are. Hence, even downtown, the reason for the design on the corners in downtown, where they're brought in a little bit, is to reduce the travel time across. So if a pedestrian can get across. I think that's part of some of the issue you're talking about too, is
It's also really wide. and
it's
long.
so wide, so it takes forever to get across that area. Okay. And VU had an issue, and I brought this up, where they, on Portland Avenue with Red Skeleton Boulevard, sorry, where they, that's what it is, where they put an island out in the front. And the reason they did that is to reduce the travel time. So they cross one section, wait, and then go across the other. And that provides a protected little zone for the pedestrian going in and out of the park. There is that opportunity there because of how wide it is. I don't know if that's the best answer, but that is certainly something that could be thought of.
And we've seen a lot of trial and error too with VU as they kind of expanded it and going on. Because I know at times that they had signs and things drilled in the road in the middle to be able to, and then people ran over those, and then they tried to get flashing lights, and then people hit those too, and then they went with the islands from those. So there's different options too, and obviously we know what really does help is that you have an extra police presence there, but with the schools not being there, we've got other places the police presence needs to be, so then that kind of shifts some of that as well. So there's a lot of different options that are available. The question is, which one do we pick to move forward with right now before we get to this project phase?
I would say some of the neighbors kind of requested more policing, and especially their, is it Gila, because they're on the edge of the park?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's a bus stop there and people are not
Yeah,
following
and
the bus stop.
that's been an issue. They've sent information into the schools and videos. We had an issue towards the end of before everybody went on the pandemic break, where we had to really kind of hammer down on that and kind of almost change the bus a little bit the way you stop, because we did have an issue there with people just not paying attention. And that's, of the utmost importance to obviously the city, the schools, that we want to be able to take care of. So that NIMBLAC spot's weird too, because it gets even wider there, so you can have a turn lane and then people go around, so.
And then it's much there, but again.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm gonna ask the residents there, that where do you cross at the most? You said at the,
I think it's at Burnett.
it's at Burnett is where that is, or is it at the end of the?
Yeah, I think it's on yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right at, you've got McDowell, and then it's
Yeah.
right there, it's right before Burnett,
That's
right?
where I
Yeah.
usually try to
Do
It's on the
you
south side of
see-
Burnett.
Sometimes use
Yeah.
Audubon, sometimes because that sort of comes into the other opening of the park.
Is that why everybody uses, is it because that's the Y into the
Yeah.
park?
Yeah.
That backwards Y or the V park?
Yeah.
Do you observe anybody crossing from Old Orchard over, or
Yeah.
you,
Oh,
Yeah.
or from
You
McDowell
go
over?
into the grass.
Yeah. A lot of kids do that.
Yeah. I think into McDowell is a shorter distance from McDowell down to just Washington School there. That would be a
place in our community that we want to slow cars down more than anything, that's the area. I mean, we have a residential area with a park right next to it, people in and out. The idea for me is that we want to slow that traffic. And I know that's frustrating to drivers, but take a different route.
Yeah.
That's a park.
Well, and it
In a
can be
residential
also
area.
on the main road there. You know, people don't want to go down Sixth Street, too many stoplights, you just cruise down Washington Avenue.
Well, it's not just that too. I mean, Greg Park's one of our bigger event areas.
It's busy,
I
and
mean,
it's great, it's great, like, food trucks down there,
Yeah.
it's great having people out in the community.
yeah, and so it's definitely something that's gotta be, I think it's just kind of built, like the more stuff that we've been doing, which is great, more events that we're having at Greg Park, and then things opening back up and people excited to be out there, and kind of a multitude of things that just happen, and now all of a sudden, we've got to figure this thing
I
out.
will say that I find it, I've ridden my bike to Great Park a few hundred times on my bike, but recently, and I find it very difficult to cross Washington Avenue. As you're, I say Washington, but even if you come up, even towards, I don't know, whatever, McKinley, those areas in there, the difficulty there is certainly trying to find a time to cross, and you can't see that curve as people curve, so, I don't know.
From my experience, I try to cross before I even get to the school. So like, we're down right there by St. Clair, so if I'm taking the kids to the park, we're trying to cross
Sure.
the whole way down, like, hey, is there a spot to go now? Let's just go ahead and cross to get the other side. Because the time you get there, it's wider, and I've got a couple squirrely little boys that like to run.
So, number one issue is crossing into the park,
I would say crossing and speeding probably.
okay?
Do you think there'd be any area that would be good to kind of stop traffic?
It's a radical idea, but yes,
I mean, it's as simplistic as that sounds.
If you're just trying to stay within Emerson and Niblack, where the new road's going,
Yeah.
it goes the whole way to Bell Crossing, but.
all the way to Bell.
But even just now,
I mean, I guess the most logical would be
Stop signs are
McDowell, I guess.
expensive.
McDowell's, but I think.
Yeah.
Stop signs are
right there,
expensive.
like a three-way down,
Yeah.
or like Niblack.
It's a roundabout.
Yeah, those are
There you
expensive.
go.
Those are expensive, I like those, but they're very expensive.
Carmel is out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like those, but they're very expensive. So,
Niblack is tough.
I am certainly for trying anything
Yeah.
temporarily. Low cost options, try it, see if it works. If it works, then improve from that option at that point. I mean, that's why we're here, is to listen to
Well,
you.
the thing is too, we just have to think, you gotta break up those distances, because there's just so many spots, I mean, it's just one long track. I mean, we have the issue on Sixth Street, when that light goes out by Impress. I mean, when that light goes out, then the speeding starts there, so we've always gotta get that light fixed relatively quick when we have a situation there, so if you could break that up, and you might not even have to break up a couple times, it might just be one spot people get used to, hey, I know there's a stop up here, which means I can't be going that fast. I don't know, I mean, to me, that seems like a simplistic answer, but then you've still got other issues that you'll have to deal with, but that would help with the speeding, which then could allow easier crossings, and
Well,
then.
even if we would tree dedicated crosswalks to McDowell, it would be a smaller area, cars are already stopped, then hopefully if people aren't crossing the traditional crosswalk, then it wouldn't be the two cars trying to pull through at the same
Right.
time, those type of things.
It does bottleneck right there, McDowell, I mean, and that could be a spot that we look at, because the tighter the space,
So
less
here's-
distance you have to go.
Here's a question. When would you let your kid go down to the park by themselves?
Hey, it's middle school for me.
What about yours, Justin?
I mean, as far as age-wise, or are you talking about time of the day?
Age-wise, and time of day would be good too.
Well, time of the day,
They're gonna have to get a lot older
there's none, yeah. 7th and 8th grade, probably, you know.
before you would think they were mature enough to cross.
Yeah, it just depends on maturity. But during the time of day, if you're looking for traffic, not really anything as far as time for the kids to go down and play at the park. Yeah, it's pretty well fast all the time around.
And early.
I think that says a lot right there.
The
Yeah.
people are walking at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5, 6,
Yeah.
7 o'clock, there's probably 40 people in the park.
No, I mean, it doesn't stop, once it starts at 5, it doesn't really stop, there'll be people out there till 9 tonight, at least.
There's lots of walkers, bikers, runners,
Dog
kids.
walkers,
Dog,
you know, families out there in strollers.
It's used a lot. I was just surprised.
So, Justin, do you have any concerns beyond what we discussed? Is there something that we're missing?
I'm not a resident of Vincent, I just, I drive that at least twice a day,
Okay.
but I drive it to avoid the stoplights on the street.
Yeah.
I don't think that, a stop sign would stop me from using it, but.
Well, that's the thing, like I spent time
Second Street. we go
yesterday in
down
front of, Vigo,
Where, Mississippi?
at the stop sign, for the
Yeah.
four-way stop in front of Vigo. You know, I was trying to gauge, because it's hard to find a spot that has similar traffic patterns and things like that. So during the early release, I went down to Vigo to see how that would look, because Vigo's got a really big student population, you have a lot of cars, just to see how long it would take. I mean, it does slow things down. Ron's got it. It does slow things down, but the question is, it's probably twice the traffic that you would see on Washington Avenue compared to what you see at Main Street. And I tried to even pick a time where you're gonna have more traffic with families coming out of dismissal from Vigo. It works, it's slow, you're not in there too long, I mean, maybe a couple minutes and you're in and out. I mean, it's not any different than anywhere else, so, I mean, I think it's a possibility. Definitely something to look into. I mean, right now, anything that we look into, I think will improve.
Even just a narrowing down to slow
Yeah.
people down rather than a full stop.
Yeah.
Even if you put it in between Mid Black and Old Orchard, people will know they're gonna have to slow down, so they'll slow down prior. And just thought, I don't know. I mean, I would, I guess,
But do you guys think McDowell would probably be the best area for that,
for a stop or for a narrowing.
for a stop?
I think Old Orchard is still a little wide there, is it? Maybe not as wide.
Then Burnett.
Well, that would then.
It's probably just as wide.
Wherever a temporary stop or a trial would then be the crosswalk.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have a stop and then a crosswalk at a different location. So, I mean, it would take moving that crosswalk a little bit. Now, what comes with a project though that is really good coming in 2022 is that then all those sidewalks become handicap accessible too. Because now they're broke up, they're hard to move things over, hard for people to walk on sometimes, or they just walk it on the edge.
And the key thing for us too right now to be able to put in a crosswalk, we gotta have sidewalk to sidewalk connection. And there's not a lot of, like, I mean, it ends right there where the crosswalk's at. I mean, I think, JP put some stuff in to be able to get us to that max point, and then it allowed us to get to Great Park. So when you think about it, obviously, if we're able to follow complete streets and go forward, then you have access in different spots that possibly you could have a different couple crosswalk points, which would be beneficial.
Question on Facebook is they need lights back in the park.
What part of the park?
It says the park.
I think the lighting would help all over the park. I mean, they're older.
I heard conversation on they don't want to light the park too much at night because then
It encourages more
it
people to be in
encourages
it.
people to be in the park at night, which the park is actually closed at night. So I think that is the biggest reason why they're not doing a lot of lighting in there. Whether that makes sense or not,
I don't know, I could always go for some more lighting
That's a
in the
chicken.
cars. I mean,
That's a chicken and egg problem.
yeah, it is.
I like more lighting. Wouldn't you like to see more lighting?
I'm not for more like.
Yeah.
I mean,
And if you go by the pickleball court at night, I mean, there's
It's
people
lit up.
there, they're playing at night, getting in and out, would definitely help a lot.
So the biggest issue on lighting in Grand Park, and I think Brian can tell you this, is that electrical in the park is not very good. An upgrade of that kind of system is required before any new lighting would certainly be put in or take place. We could increase some of it, but
I know Steve's looked at doing some LED replacement lighting.
that would
in the
help
park.
with the draw and what's there.
It's very expensive, and I don't know have for that, but
I don't think there's much lighting for the entrance to the park.
I think that's part of it too, is that entrance in and out. I don't necessarily always know if we need it in the back either, but maybe at the, where people are crossing, so they can be seen, so the driver can see them.
Well, definitely coming in and out. I think those are areas where.
and this new project will obviously
Put down
include
the
lighting. Both
Yeah, like, I
sides,
mean,
so that will really help that area a lot.
Yeah, it's, I mean, so I'm just trying to think, you know, I go through this a lot of times too. I mean, it's extremely
So,
dark.
these concerns, obviously, we're gonna take them to the mayor, Board of Public Works, and our engineer, and let them kind of figure out how they wanna implement, or how, if they choose to implement it, and this is gonna be our committee's recommendation, we're gonna ask them to, I believe, we haven't, we're a committee, we haven't taken a vote or anything, but, I think that we will recommend that them, look at temporary measures, whether those temporary measures include a stop light or a stop sign, whether they include even, maybe an upgrade of the lighting, waiting for 2 years, you know, if we have it up for 2 years in those entry into the park.
Well, if we're talking just like
Better
lighting to the
stripe.
entry of the park, that's different than lighting everywhere. And if we're looking at temporary measures like a stop sign area, I mean, that's an easy trial. I mean, we've done these trials in numerous spots. I mean, we've tried them when we want to remove like maybe just a flashing light, we want a 4-way stop, I can take it just right over here, and we've tried it out. That's usually a 30-day trial, and you go for it, you see how it goes.
Radical, crazy narrowing of the street in a temporary manner, see what happens with that, I mean,
Even if there was lanes that were marked a little bit better,
And
or
better marking.
maybe like a temporary bike lane on shore side, just to
So
put
kind
a divider of some type.
With the, what do you call it, complete streets? or-
Yeah, complete streets ordinance.
When that, if you can do that or whatever, what happens, will you have sidewalks on both sides?
Yeah, I mean, that's
So
what,
on the other side, next
in
to the
Drake
park?
Park, there would be a.
So that will
It would
narrow
allow
that
for
as well.
crossing into that.
so if you remember like Second Street, there were a lot of patches that didn't have like sidewalks that went with it.
I wanna say that design is not done, so I'm not 100% sure that I can say that, but that's what complete streets mean.
Yeah, we're
Right,
talking
that's-
about,
yeah,
okay,
that's my
if it's
question.
possible, if it's something that we can do and it works out with everything, that's always the goal of Complete Streets program or Complete Streets ordinance, is being able to do those
If
things.
there's any place in this community, like I said, that not only do you wanna slow it down, but a protected bike lane, that is a protected bike lane area, you know, that curve, you could create a protected bike lane there pretty easily, it's wide enough.
Well, it's slow, I mean, putting the bike lane in on Second Street, I don't think we had as many speeding issues on Second, but it did slow things down on Second, because now I see the bike lane, I see the marker, you're aware of it, you're kind of keeping your eyes peeled for it. And people are good about that. The problem we run into at Washington Avenue is it's just, here's a strip of asphalt, here you go. And then I know all of us are probably guilty of it. It's just like, you're going slow, the next thing you know, slowly but surely, you start speeding up, and you're like, oh, man.
Like whenever that temporary, speed sign was on,
Yeah.
it's like, you don't realize you go
Right.
36
Yeah.
and it's a 20, you don't realize that you're going that fast.
How well do those work? Especially the ones that start flashing a strobe at
They
you.
worked for a while.
They work for a while if you have battery, if you do solar.
Well, I mean, as a result of slowing
Well,
people
they
down,
slow
is
people
there?
down for a while,
Oh, even that.
until they get used to it.
Oh, okay.
And then they kind of go through it. You have to kind of move around quite a bit. I'm not too sure a police car parked there would be a better, it was, I mean, just empty even. Just park it there. It would slow people down. You'd be surprised, and then move it every once in a while. That works tremendously.
See, I'm always in favor of enforcing what we have there, instead of stopping the traffic, I would much rather see some enforcement.
Yeah.
Upgraded, or more frequent enforcement out there, because, you know,
I mean,
Second-
it's
or
20
Main
mile an hour
Street
zone
down.
from where to where?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do what?
20 mile an hour from where to where?
Just
I
north
would
of,
say like just before McDowell, maybe Ritter Stamp-ish.
Okay, so where that-
And it's right after Winter Stamp, because I can see the sign before you hit that
Maybe
building.
like by WB's.
Yeah.
there.
So, and-
Right by there.
Yeah.
What do you think the average speed is there?
Average speed?
35.
It's gotta be 35.
40?
yeah.
enforcement does do that. It is a punitive kind of, Brian's a punitive kind of person with that, with the big stick.
Well,
I want to entice them to go slow.
when you start hearing your friends getting, 60 and 30 tickets, you'll be conscious of that the next time you're driving through there, and I think that's the best. I don't want to see traffic backed up. I'm not saying, no, we can't do the stop sign, but I'm not, I would much rather try enforcement first, and, that's two things. Also creates a little bit of revenue.
Well, I think the biggest, like, we'll do anything that works.
Do I go?
Like, anything that works, anything that benefits the area, I don't care what it is. If it's Mark's idea, my idea, Brian's idea, I don't care how it works.
So the press can't ask me a question, but does the press have a question for these two? No?
Gee, from Scott.
That was a name that comes off the page.
Listen, you
No, I don't think so,
can. No?
not from
Alright.
I just got a message. She said, I seriously think those stops for pedestrian signs at the park, or by cars crossing, need flashing lights around them, like the stop signs in some busy cities.
I'd say the flashing lights around your
Yeah.
walking area.
Draw attention to those
Like a
pedestrian
PU.
signs.
Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they definitely.
Yeah, I mean, those are things too that we could work on or
Those
send
signs
people
in
up.
there, they're just not accomplished.
Right.
And
Well, and so you brought them up the other day. I didn't know they existed.
yeah, a lot of people don't. In my
Didn't know they
previous
existed.
Facebook rant about this last year, people were like, I never even seen those signs right there.
No, like, I mean, when you
They
first,
blend in.
when you say when they first put them up, I think people were like, okay, here's an area, let's slow down, and afterwards it's like, I don't think I've ever seen somebody slow down around that spot.
And I think my wife could attest that my head is not on the road that much. It's always looking at everything else, and I certainly never noticed that. I observe everything else but the road.
You're just taking it all in. You're just taking it all in. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, there is.
Is there anything else that you can think of for that spot specifically? I think it's pretty straightforward with some of the stuff that we're seeing. I mean, it's not like it's crazy. I mean,
it's just a matter of time before something's
right, and that's what we don't want that to happen.
That's why we're having this.
Yeah.
And especially with the amount of kids that we have up there, not just in the residential area, but in our parks.
Yeah. In the parks, we want to encourage that community, getting people active, getting people outdoors, enjoying football games, all of those things.
I mean, it's one of our biggest assets. I mean, our park system is one of our biggest assets.
So a frustrating thing about is that people drive to the park to walk.
We're just sitting there.
Does that, so, does that tell you how bad it is to get there?
Absolutely.
That how bad it is to walk there or to ride a bike there? Because people would rather drive to the park to walk, even if they don't have to go very far. They're driving. So that should say to us, there is certainly something very wrong with the design to get there. As we observe what's going on, guys. I go off the deep end on this
Well,
one.
I know, and this is what I'm trying to keep you back, because I know how deep that you can get on this one. With,
Walkable cities.
yeah, walkable cities, you want
Why-
that tree shade in those
Why go on
areas.
vacation there? Why
You
just
will
not make
start-
one at home?
You will start going on this rant, and I love it, it's a good one.
All right, so let's not do this. If you have any other questions, this video will be up. You can continue to comment underneath those. If you have suggestions, please put them on here. Send it to Brian, Tim, or myself. We will be glad to do this.
I think the recommendation that we'll probably make to our city engineer and the mayor is like, here's a couple options that we discussed. Take a look at these, whether it's enforcement, whether it's a stop, whether we put up some kind of temporary barrier to kind of narrow things. Take a look at which one of these do you think will work best. And let's discuss this with the Board of Works. And then obviously that will come to us as a council. But we're gonna put these things that we discussed tonight here. This is what we think will work. We think something right now, let's try it. If it works, awesome. And then we go on the stage and just taking ideas for the upcoming project. If it doesn't, we go back to the drawing board. I mean, this is what it's all about.
And I mean, those signs obviously with flashing lights cost money. The council, I think we could probably find something in a line item that would fit this. I mean, you guys are the budget people. I come up with ideas and you go, we can't pay for those.
Use the tourism fund. before we close, do you want to have any other questions?
I had one other one that I just thought of based on what Mark said. Something to think about, or maybe it's not a question, more just an observation, but you're right. When I run, I don't run that way. I run south because I don't like it. The sidewalks are broken. I don't feel safe. So if you fix it and you have sidewalks on both sides, if it's already an issue, it's going to become a greater issue because people who don't normally walk or run in that area, or maybe never felt like they could walk to the park, are going to start doing that.
Right.
So,
That's a great point. I mean, 'cause I
Yeah.
know that I like to go down Second Street now because you got everything there.
Yeah.
Go down Main Street now, I mean, because it's just easier to get into and just run. I mean, I don't have the runner's frame, but I try to.
There's
We can continue our race.
Thanks, you can hit the button. We'll get
All
out
right,
of
we'll get out of here.
here. Thank you.
body's not made for endurance, it's made for power.